keeping you up to speed on all your Colorado teams. It's time for Coffee Break.
The Broncos officially put the 2024 season to bed today. Dion seems to be flirting with Dallas. We got a Gabe Landeskog sighting, and Jamal Murray looked like Jamal Murray. Makes for a pretty eventful hump day. So let's get into it. Jake Shapiro from denversports.com. Jake, I want to start with the Buffs here because Dion, as he's prone to do, has kept himself and the Colorado Buffaloes program by extension in the headlines lately with the continued waiting game back and forth about signing the deal that all indications are is in front of him to remain in Boulder for an extended period of time, or to move on to another opportunity, whether that be another collegiate program, perhaps an SEC school or something with a little bit bigger collective, or the Dallas Cowboys after a conversation with Jerry Jones. Jake, what do you make of this back and forth and the discourse that we've seen unfold in the last week or so?
I think that Deion Sanders is a master negotiator and a master of manipulating the media and knowing how to get his tentacles into the media and getting his name always talked about. I'm not surprised that Deion has called old friends and has had conversations with old friends about potential opportunities in the NFL, particularly when I've heard some things about how Deion, might have a hard time right now letting Shedeur go to the next level without him. It makes sense. He's coached his son his entire career.
True.
Realistically, there's not a great path for Shedeur and Deion to team up at the next level as currently appeared. All the teams that need quarterbacks are have coaches, and all the teams that have coaches don't need quarterbacks and vice versa. So it's kind of like this weird situation. The only one that really makes sense is the Raiders, and they don't really have a position in the draft that would make all that much sense for getting Shedeur unless something drastic happened. And even then, it seems like, that's not going to happen because of some things I've heard with the Raiders side. So to me, this is a lot of bluster from Deion Sanders to try and get his name talked about, promote the Coach Prime documentary, which released last week, by the way, on Amazon Prime. And, this doesn't hurt CU's program so long as he commits to the Buffs before the next transfer portal window opens, which doesn't happen for another couple weeks. And by that time, the cycle is going to be finished for the NFL head coaching positions.
So, Jake, you don't think that there's any smoke to this fire at all? Because I agree with you in the sense that Deion is a master marketer, as is Jerry Jones, frankly, and they have an inept way to just keep themselves at the front page of that newspaper or in the topic of conversation. And the concept of leverage has been brought up a lot as it relates to Deion with this situation. And I have been pretty firmly of the mind that Deion Sanders, specifically with what's happened the last 2 years in Boulder, even though they may not have reached the level that was expected, that was wanted, or, may have been attainable at the time, Deion Sanders doesn't need leverage, in my opinion. I think he's able to right now walk into Rick George's office or go to the Board of Regents and say, hey, this is the maximum amount of money that I'm allowed to make as a state employee, which is another thing I think people need to keep in mind. It's seemingly a cap in terms of what he can be offered. And I'm going to get to that. But I was told by James Palmer yesterday, an interesting rebuttal was that I think I may be being a little bit myopic as it relates to the use and the purpose of leverage, and that the leverage or this conversation with Jerry Jones may have a lot less to do with Deion, who's going to get his essentially, and more to do with how much more can I squeeze out of the University of Colorado when it comes to an NIL collective, and how well can I pay my assistants as a CEO figurehead type coach who maybe isn't as in the nitty gritty with the X's and O's, which we've all established and are okay with. But you got to pay the right people to do that if you're in Deion's case, and this may be helping out with that cause. What says you?
Well, the answer on the NIL collective is he's going to get zero from the NIL collective because the NIL collective does not exist anymore in Boulder. They got rid of that last week because CU Boulder is actually ahead of the curve. This is good news that for Buff fans, they got rid of the NIL collective. So there's a new bill going on in legislatures and they're trying to figure this out in the judiciary branch right now. But essentially everything that's changed in college football, the transfer portal, NIL, all this stuff, it's not because the NCAA has wanted it to happen.
Right.
It's because the United States government has said, no, what you're doing is illegal. You need for allowed to be people to have these rights. So one of these things that's going on currently is basically there is something that's going to get passed that allows for every institution in the United States to pay $22 million directly from the university to athletes across their athletic departments. So it does not make sense for the University of Colorado, knowing that this is coming, to direct people to third-party directives and third-party NIL collectives when they themselves need that money to pay the athletes straight up. Now, NIL will still exist on top of all of this. So schools that are very rich, like Alabama or maybe LSU, who has multiple athletic programs that are competing at a high level, will still get the car dealerships and the local radio stations to do collective type deals and NIL deals with different players or subsets of players or entire teams. But in CU's case, they're going to have a hard time generating $22 million to pay athletes.
Right.
The Buffs also have a highly successful, at least in terms of Division I, some people would dispute this in terms of the power level, men's and women's basketball programs. And there's 15 programs on campus, 9 of them women's, 6 of them men's. So some of the leverage that Deion could be negotiating for is what percentage of that hypothetical $22 million goes to the football program and where and how can he spend it? There's also potential leverage outside of the athletic department. When Deion came to the University of Colorado, the school, part of Deion's contract, the school had to change their transfer requirements school-wide, as well as some of the stuff to get into the institution. So Deion could be negotiating outside of the athletic department with the school about some stuff that he may not like or some stuff that he may like that he's trying to accomplish. And I thought it was very telling yesterday that in the Boulder circles, it came out that CU's football team, for the first time ever, their GPA hit 3.0 as an average over the fall semester. So there's some rumblings of some stuff that are going on behind the scenes that aren't making national news that lend some credence into the theory that, yeah, you know what, there's probably fire behind every smoke, but the fire to me is more so leverage, and he really, really cares and loves his son Shador, and he's having a hard time letting him go, which is completely understandable.
Well, along those same lines, I somewhat jokingly, when asked the question of what percentage chance would you give Deion Sanders to be on the sidelines at Jerry World next season, I gave it a 2% chance because everything Deion Sanders has done up to this point has been for his son, and his son's number is 2, at least the son that's going to go in the top 6 in the NFL draft. So that was what I had said previously, but after hearing you lay all of that out, some of which I definitely did not know, I'm going to give it a 0.0% chance that Deion is anywhere but Boulder this coming off season. I guess I should say a 0.0% chance that he goes to the NFL. I'll put it that way. Because why, when you have the deep-rooted power that you already have up in the Flatirons, and it's clearly manifesting itself in real time with these negotiations, why would you ever leave? Especially when, in Deion's case, you can feel pretty confident you're going to get what you want, right?
He literally has a blank check right now. Like, that is the offer on the table from what I'm told. I mean, I don't know everything. I don't have the best sources on this, but I think it's pretty fair to assume that he has a blank check at this point, given what we've seen in the last 2 years and what that athletic department wants and what it allows Deion to already do. He has all the power in the world right now. He literally is leveraging the entire NFL over his son right now. He is bigger than just about anything we have ever dealt with in Colorado. So it's really hard to wrap your head around what Deion can and can't do. I'm not going to say never on Deion to the NFL. I've never said never, even though Deion himself has said never. If the right opportunity arose, and maybe this is an opportunity for future leverage as well.
Sure.
That's something that
dip a toe
in mind, keep himself in the cycle, keep his hype, all that stuff. Maybe there's an opportunity next year if Shador gets drafted by a team who already has a coach, that it doesn't work out in year one. And they say, well, the best way to fix Shador is to go get Deion. And that buyout number on Deion's contract right now is $8 million for the University of Colorado if he leaves this year. Next year it goes down. I haven't checked the number, Richie, but it's like below 4 or 5, 3 million. It's a minuscule amount of money comparatively to an NFL owner. So
right.
There is potential here that this is setting up for the future. And you also have to keep in mind when he goes on Good Morning America and says, the only way I would leave my current position, which I love in Boulder, and I love what I'm doing, an inspiring young man, the only way I would do that is to coach my sons, not my son. So he would have to get Shiloh onto a roster, and part of this could be that he's leveraging his position to try and get Shiloh drafted somewhere as well. So there's a lot of stuff going on here that's not as simple as just another coach like, Matt Campbell right now at Iowa State, maybe making the jump from Iowa State to the Chicago Bears. There's a lot more going on, as well as the fact that Deion's one of the most famous players in Dallas Cowboys history. Yep. And he's an icon of that franchise. And he's got a close relationship with that owner. And by the way, he's got close relationships with everyone across the NFL because he worked for the NFL Network for 10 years after he played in the NFL for 15. So this is a different level, Richie. And it's hard to completely comprehend. Think about it, Richie. I'm covering the Nuggets last night. I'm thinking I'm done with the Buffs for the day, and all of a sudden, Greg Anthony's on the sidelines getting tweeted at from Deion Sanders, and Shapiro is sitting courtside. These guys are everywhere. Their tentacles are everywhere.
Yep, I saw Shapiro sitting courtside last night. I thought that was interesting, especially because, of course, it's in Dallas, and all of the parallels that you draw there. Let's get into the Nuggets game from last night, because that was where I wanted to go next. We saw, in my opinion, at least the first in a long time, emergence or resurgence of Champion Murray, as was quoted on all the t-shirts, because it's not playoff, it's not finals, it's champion now. We saw it last night. And Jake, as I was watching that game, that first half, but specifically that first quarter, from Jamal Murray was just unbelievable. And it was just a constant reminder to me that champion level player that we saw, who was integral to that run and had been up to that point, it's still there. And it's a reminder that if he can find a way, he being Jamal, to maintain, you're not going to get 32 points and a half very often. It was a career high for him in that regard. And you don't need that. But if he can keep a somewhat close level of play on a consistent basis to that, you saw it unfold in real time. It's genuinely daunting to stop the Nuggets in that regard.
Yeah, if he continues that level of play, the Nuggets are unstoppable because they have literally the best basketball player ever. And that's not Nikola Jokic, because if you score 45 points a night, you're the best basketball player ever. I'm not going to be the person that if only Jamal can continue this level. I'll give you a stat, Richie. The Nuggets are 9-2 this season when Jamal Murray shoots 18 or more shots. It's not even about Jamal hitting all of those shots. Last night, some of it's luck. Sometimes your shots go in, sometimes they don't. Last night he was on. That's part of the game. But the mentality from Jamal to continue to shoot, that aggression is so key to the Nuggets and what they do. I think it also helps Jamal on the defensive side of the ball. What I will tell you is Dallas is a team who has struggled recently. They
no Luka, Kyrie had just come back.
They don't have the best perimeter defense in the NBA. So Jamal took advantage of a situation. And this is coming off the heels of a game in which on Friday night he was pulled because of his knee became a concern. And on Sunday, where he was playing not well in the first half, and Michael Malone almost pulled him again because of his knee. So I thought this was an extremely positive sign about Jamal Murray's health, his toughness, where he's at mentality-wise into the second half of the season. And I don't know if you know this stat, Richie, but the 45 points he scored last night, that's the most points he's had in any basketball game, regular or postseason, Olympic, international, across the board, since his ACL surgery.
Yeah, I think I did see. I didn't know it was specifically related to the ACL injury, but I did see it was since 2016 or 17 or somewhere around that. It felt like it was definitely pre-COVID.
50 in the bubble, and then he had 50 in Cleveland right before the ACL.
So yeah, no, but it wasn't just Jamal, for the record, which I agree with you. The stat about their record when he attempts at least a certain amount of shots, that hitting that threshold, because I do think that plays a significant role in how they space the floor, how they operate the offense. Jake, if you had told me that through a quarter and a half of basketball, Nikola Jokic was going to attempt one shot and DeAndre Jordan was the team's second leading scorer, I would not have expected that sentence to finish with they're up 17 at that point in the game. And you had to wait until, I believe it was 2 minutes left in the first quarter for Jokic to take that shot. And he didn't take another one until 3 minutes left before halftime. So when you're playing out in real time, watching the Nuggets be able to just dominate a team that was struggling, you mentioned some of the perimeter defense. Kyrie had just come back, still no Luka. Lively went out in the first quarter after stepping on Jokic's ankle that way. So they definitely weren't the Dallas Mavericks at full strength that we watched in the NBA Finals. But if they're able to operate that way, if Jamal is able to keep a presence on the court like that, and you saw how Jokic is able to play off of that, I think there is like a spreading factor that comes to that, because it wasn't just Jamal that was on. I watched Russell Westbrook and DeAndre Jordan connect for jams like 4 times in 7 possessions or something crazy in the middle quarters there. And Michael Porter Jr. felt like he was hitting some shots. And it just really, I feel like it just energizes the whole unit, and it takes such a load off of Jokic to where he can have I heard Brandon Stokely refer to it as a baby triple-double, 10 points, 14 rebounds, 10 assists, or whatever it was.
Which is a triple-double for everyone else across the league.
It's a baby triple-double for Jokic.
Yeah, that's what it looks like when most guys get a triple-double. They barely get there.
Right.
For Jokic, that's at the end of the third quarter, and he didn't play the fourth, and he didn't want to shoot because his guy had 40. By the way, that was the first game in NBA history in which one guy scored 45 points and no one else in the game had more than 13.
Correct. I saw that.
So Jamal, and we're talking about how well everyone looked across the board. No one really scored last night for the Nuggets besides Jamal. And that's the point, Richie. And I think that's to undersell it to our viewers right now is what Nikola Jokic continued to tell me when they were on that 20-game playoff run, in which resulted with a finals ring. I cannot be our best player if we're going to win a championship. It needs to be Jamal Murray. Now, he is simply being nice to his teammate. Jamal Murray is nowhere near as good of a player as Nikola Jokic, and never will be, and wasn't across that playoff run. But the point is, Nikola Jokic knows Jamal Murray needs to take the lead of the team and play at an all-star caliber level, whether it was in 2022 or now, for the Nuggets to have a legitimate chance. And right now, the Nuggets are playing at a very high level. They've won a multiple amount of games in a row. They're at 4 in a row. I think they've won like 8 of their last 9. They've got a very tough game against Houston tonight, which is going to be very telling on them back-to-back. Very few telling back-to-backs in the NBA, but this one is because the Rockets are one of the top teams in the league, and the Nuggets got their butt kicked by the Rockets twice at home last year. They only play them 3 times, so that tiebreaker is going to come up big. They need to win 2 out of those 3 games. They beat Dallas last night, which is a tiebreaker against Dallas, and they're just above them in the standings. So some of these things are coming clearer into view, by the way, Richie, which we're at the midway point of the season. So if there were ever a time for Jamal Murray to seemingly flip the switch and get right, now is the time. And I will tell you, over the last 12 games, Jamal's had about 7 great games, 3 stinkers, and like 2 just okay ones. So Jamal is flipping this switch. It's not going to be tonight that people look back and say, this is when things got right for Jamal. It's that Sacramento game when he hit that shot late down the stretch. And by the way, he took the same amount of shots in that game as he did last night, 26. Jamal needs to keep shooting. He needs to stay aggressive. He needs to provide that spacing of the floor from 3-point range. And by the way, his chemistry with Russell Westbrook is developing, where Russ at times is playing point guard. Jamal is better playing off ball. At the start of the season, that looked like an absolute disaster. Now it's looking like it can be viable even in crunch time minutes, which the Nuggets are 3rd best in the NBA right now in crunch time net rating. So there are some real positive signs that there is a great team somewhere inside this Nuggets team, and we started to see it in the last month.
It has always been a fascination with me with Jamal of that. What would he look like playing a pure 2 guard if you had a legitimate point guard in there? And I never envisioned that to be 36-year-old Russell Westbrook like we are seeing this season. But like, for example, when Drew Holiday was on the market coming out of New Orleans, and I was like, man, if you put Drew Holiday with Nikola Jokic as the point center, Drew running the actual point, and put Jamal at the 2, what could that look like? And I think that we're seeing sparks and moments of the potential of what it can look like if all of those pieces are clicking. And on that last note, to close out the Nuggets conversation before I talk to you about a couple of quick Avs things, What do you think about the potential, given what we're seeing the flickers from Jamal of like that player that we know the level he's capable of reaching? What do you think about the potential starting lineup tinkering options that are available now that Aaron Gordon is back fully healthy? The option of running Russell Westbrook at the 1 and the chemistry that he's developing with Jokic and now Jamal and the comfortability potentially playing at the 2 at times. As we get on the back half of the season as toward the play or even toward the playoffs, what intrigues you about potential lineup options and maybe players coming off the bench who we wouldn't normally have thought they would or haven't so far this season?
Well, let me just construct the starting lineup with you, Richie, real quick. Nikola Jokic is your starting center, no matter what, right? Okay, who else are your non-negotiables in that starting lineup?
I would say you probably put MPJ in there somewhere.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. I think you want Aaron Gordon out there for as many minutes with Nikola Jokic as possible based off what we've seen. So that's 3. And, you can stagger it like we've seen in the playoffs where he plays a lot of backup minutes as well. So that's 3. So who are your starting guards?
Well, I think you have to just because of the potential that was there. You're not going to bench Jamal Murray. At least not for significant minutes. I just don't think you're going to do that, although it's felt that way at times. And then I like the way that Russell Westbrook has run a lot. Now, I say that knowing that you're going to front load the starting 5 and that leaves not a lot for your bench unit. I get that.
So for a lot of people, it's become a Russ versus Christian thing.
Yep.
I'll answer this very clearly. The Nuggets aren't moving Christian Brown out of their starting lineup.
And I think he's earned that right, by the way. I think he's played at a viable NBA starter level this season for the most part.
He's been pretty good. I'd give him a B+ on the season. He had one 3-week, 2-week bad stretch, but besides that, he's been pretty good. He needs to stay aggressive. And one of the big parts of staying aggressive and being confident in your shot is having the confidence of your team and staying in the starting lineup and not getting a reduction in role, perhaps. So it's really important to maintain Christian's confidence and his aggression. So I don't think there's a world in which the Nuggets are healthy, besides in this world right now where Aaron Gordon's coming back from an injury or someone else might be coming back from an injury, where they change up the starting 5. I think the starting 5 is what it is moving forward for the rest of the season. And I know that's frustrating for some people who've seen Russell Westbrook start and have seen how well that works. What I will tell you is the Nuggets are fully capable of running that lineup with Russell Westbrook at points in the game when it matters. And Russ, at this point in his career, and what he has said mentality-wise, seems completely willing to come off the bench and doesn't view it as a slight. That's a positive for the Nuggets. The Nuggets should take that and run with it. By the way, and I've said this on the Mile High Hoops podcast over and over,
shout out,
I would rather put Peyton Watson in the starting lineup than Christian Brown or Russell Westbrook.
I was just going to go there because it stemming from the fact that Peyton Watson, I think, is one of the better defenders on the team. And I think that he has made a lot out of the minutes that he's been given through large stretches of the season. And the comments from Aaron Gordon, who's been dealing with a minutes restriction since coming back and all that, who basically said in not as many words that he is not vehemently against if Malone thinks it's best for him to come off the bench in this interim and kind of use me how you think is best to use me, which I think has been a hallmark of Aaron Gordon's tenure and the kind of reinvention of his reinvigoration of his career since coming to Denver. He's just that hard hat and lunch pail guy that I respect so much. So that was part of the initial inspiration behind my question is like, what would you think if they rolled out or could you see a world where they roll out maybe a starting 5 that has Peyton Watson in the starting lineup and potentially Christian Brown and or Aaron Gordon coming off the bench unit to help survive the non-Jokic minutes and rolling with MPJ, say, at the 4 and Peyton Watson at the 3 or vice versa?
So the thing with Peyton Watson is the reason you'd put him at the starting 2-guard position is because of the size. And you would do this against certain teams in a playoff matchup. So you're not taking Aaron Gordon out of the starting lineup in that situation because you're trying to size up. You're actually going to use Aaron Gordon as more of a shooting guard, per se, in that position because of he's going to do some playmaking. And then MPJ, and it's weird because the Nuggets center is their starting point guard. It all kind of is surplus with who plays what position.
It's on a box score. How does it look?
Correct. So you're just putting Peyton in there if you want to size up or if you like a matchup. And that might happen in the playoffs. But over the course of the season, Christian's going to continue to start. What I will tell you, something I've noticed, and I need to look into the 2-man stats and the lineups. I want MPJ and Peyton Watson playing as many minutes together as possible. They seemingly play. I don't even know if they themselves have a great chemistry, but when they're on the court together, they complement each other in their games so well. So I've really enjoyed that. And I think the Nuggets are finding something here. And I think Russell Westbrook has been terrific. I still caution people with what we might see from Russ in the postseason. Last year, the playoffs were an absolute disaster for Russell Westbrook. And he struggles to three-point shoot. And part of the Nuggets' success this year has been built off the fact they're great in transition and they get out and they move up the pace. They're running quick. They're playing quick. Historically speaking, quick teams do not play well, and that does not translate well into the postseason. So, And I talked about this yesterday on the Mile High Hoops podcast.
Shout out.
One of the big parts of this stretch of the season, the next 2-3 weeks with everyone healthy, is figuring out their transition game, not their non-transition game, their half-court game. What happens when their offense gets slowed down? What happens when these guys need to adjust? And we saw this in crunch time in Dallas on Sunday. Russell Westbrook was playing point guard to put more rim pressure and make guys guard him out on the perimeter, because you're not going to guard Russ as a catch and shooter in the corner, but you will guard Russ if he has the ball because you don't want him to drive. So Jamal Murray was spotting up. So you're seeing some adjustments being made by the Nuggets. Last night, Kyrie Irving, he got completely picked on by the Nuggets. They continued to put him in the action. They were putting him in every single action. They were getting him switched on to guys. So the Nuggets are playing a smarter brand of basketball recently, and their half-court offense, they're making smarter decisions. They need to continue to improve in that asset in order to have a successful postseason. And a lot of that with Russell Westbrook in the lineup is built on ways to find a way to make Russell Westbrook a viable court spacer and a threat at all times with or without the ball. And the Nuggets are very smart about this. When Aaron Gordon was struggling to shoot in the postseason, when they won the title, they put him in the dunker spot. They found that incredible lob combination from Jokic to Aaron Gordon. Okay, it's easy to do that maybe with one guy who's struggling to shoot. When you have Christian Brown out there who also goes games and games without hitting a three-point shot, and Russell Westbrook, who's legitimately the worst volume three-point shooter in the NBA's history, it puts a lot of pressure on Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr., which last night was a huge positive sign because Jamal's had some of this pressure on him, and it's part of the reason why he hasn't played well. And he even talked about it last night with part of it's spacing, part of it's my injury, but I take the blame and accountability for it. He is right. Part of it is spacing. The Nuggets are constructed a little bit differently this year, and part of this first half of the season was simply figuring that out.
I want to give Jamal a lot of credit here at the end here for saying what he said after the game on the broadcast. And he fully took responsibility about, people were referencing Shaquille O'Neal's comments pregame, which I believe Jamal when he says that he didn't hear that or see that, because those guys have routines and things. They're locked in. They're not watching TV like a lot of us with these games. So, but I want to give him a lot of credit for coming out and saying he's absolutely right. I have not played well, and it has been subpar, and basically taking the ownership that is necessary for somebody in his position, especially to do it after it finally starts to turn around. I thought that was a mature, humble, and appropriate response to things. And now it's just about continuing and stacking it. On the subject of accountability, I think we're living in a bizarro world right now where the Colorado Avalanche, the 5 of the top 20 best skaters in hockey, may have to now start taking accountability for games that they snuck by and won in overtime, but games where they were not, none of them were the best players on the ice, and that player was between the pipes. And Mackenzie Blackwood, the Avalanche went from having one of the worst goaltender situations in hockey for the last couple of years to a situation where there's a chance that their goalie may be the best player on the team on any given night.
Their goalie can finally win them games. And this has not been something you could have said about the Avs going back, I don't know, Jean-Sebastien Giguère. He was washed by the time he was here. But you get the point. Varley at his peak, I guess. I don't know. Yeah. But you get the point. Patrick Roy, obviously. But it's been a while since the Avs have had a guy between Jocelyn Thibault. Let's go through the Rolodex. It's been a while since the Avs have had a guy that can win them hockey games. And I thought it was really impressive from Mackenzie Blackwood last night. It's going to be a different thing come playoff time. And can he continue to keep these scores at 1-2 goals for the other team? The comeback was impressive. Arturi Lehkonen is so important to this team because he's a guy that provides depth scoring for them. I know sometimes he plays in the top 6, but if everyone's healthy, he might get bumped down into that third line. And it is so important in the NHL to have a guy on your third line who can score 20 plus goals. And Arturi Lehkonen does a lot of the dirty work and scores some pretty nasty goals. So And by the way, some really important goals over the course of his history of his career as well.
Correct.
So that was really cool. And, I just think the Avs are in such a good place right now, Richie. You're looking at it across the board. And I'm very excited for this week of games. I think Thursday, right, they play Edmonton, and that's going to be pretty telling with the two guys coming in here. And I know they've struggled a little bit this season, but, it's always a show when McDavid, Draisaitl, Makar, and McKinnon are on the ice.
Yeah, they've got a tough 4-game stretch coming up between Winnipeg and Edmonton. And, and I think that for them to have a game and kind of like last night and trend in the direction that they're trending, I think it's a perfect time of it because these games are going to start to get more important. And so with Mackenzie Blackwood kind of being able to anchor this team, especially while we wait for the health status of Scott Wedgwood, who is still going to be on a recovery track to be able to kind of come back in there. But I to your point, that they've been such a good place, and it's such a different place that I did not expect them to be in. And I just couldn't feel better about it, especially with the trade deadline looming in a couple of months. And you put an article at denversports.com that I want to make sure that I touch on here briefly about the future of Mikko Rantanen, something we've been going back and forth throughout the majority of this season because of the decisions that they've made and the contract negotiations that have stalled. And it's now seeming like there's more smoke behind the fire that Mikko Rantanen could be dealt at the trade deadline in a couple of months. What do we need to know?
Yeah, there's a report from the French-Canadian TV partner, TVA, which, I had to translate for our audience. But essentially it's spelled out as Mikko Rantanen as one of the 25 guys that could be dealt that has a pretty sizable name before the deadline. Out of most likely to least likely to happen, it was 20 out of 25. But they are talking about it, and it was a legitimate NHL insider bringing this to the forefront. And we know that the Avs and Mikko Rantanen, his contract is up at the end of the season. They have seemingly been close to a contract negotiation and a contract extension in the past. That has been reported across the media multiple times and is said as much by Joe Sakic that they were not worried about an extension with Mikko Rantanen. But we're sitting here about 6 weeks, 7 weeks before the trade deadline, and that has not yet happened. And he is again on a 100-point pace, and he's on pace to do that for the third straight season. So he is a very important player. He deserves to get paid. He's asking to be paid more perhaps than Nathan McKinnon at $13 million, which would come under just Austin Matthews for the highest paid player in the league. I think the Avs can work out some stuff with some money differentials and whatever that actually brings that number a little bit lower. But all you need to know is Mikko Rantanen is asking for a lot of money. He deserves a lot of money. The Avs are already up against the cap, but the cap is expected to raise. So they're in this precarious spot where it's like, do we commit all of this extra cap space we're going to have to a player we already know what's great? Or do we take what's in this questionable unopened box? And I think the Avs are going to re-sign Moose. Like, that's the logical thing to do. They know he works well with the guys they've got. He's been fantastic. Richie, I don't even know if people realize this. He's 6th in franchise history in goals scored. He's 3rd in postseason assists. He's one of the best players in Avs history. If he re-signs here, there's no doubt his number is going to be in the rafters. So
100%.
Yeah, so the Avs are probably going to re-sign him, but it is worth noting that there is some smoke behind some trade rumors, and it makes sense that a player of his ilk, if the Avs were unable to get a contract extension with him, they'd be seeing, hey, what could we get back for him? Because we can't just let this guy walk out the door from nothing. But I don't think the trade deadline is the deadline. I think June 1st is the deadline personally, or July 1st.
July 1st.
The deadline, and that's when NHL free agency opens. And it is important to point out, unrestricted free agents in the NHL sometimes get traded right before they actually hit free agency for draft capital. So the Avs, if they're unable to sign Mikko and it's looking bad, they might ship him out of here for a 2nd or a 3rd round pick. Obviously, Mikko's worth more than that, but at least it's something versus absolutely nothing.
Speaking of players whose names are going to be up in the rafters, did you experience the same bout of dizziness and vertigo and deja vu that I did when I saw on social media the videos of Gabe Landeskog skating at the Avs facility? And I'll put it out in front, looking better than we've seen him in even a lot of these other videos. But Jake, did it not just feel like we've seen this play before? We've read this story before as it relates to Gabe skating in practice?
I feel like I've watched Gabe Landeskog's lower body more than I have Cale Makar or Nathan McKinnon, and I actually watch those guys play hockey more. The thing is with Gabe, and love him, we all love him. We all want him to come back, and I think that's why we continue to talk about it, is because we know Gabe Landeskog, the person, the player, and we want him to come back. Personally, I'm not going to get too excited about it until I see him on uniform, going out on the ice before a game and actually warming up, and he gets announced in the lineup. And even then, we don't know what the player Gabe Landeskog will look like after these knee surgeries. And, because it's an unprecedented surgery. And Lonzo Ball, thankfully, has made a recovery, and he's playing right now. He's not at the same level he once was, but at least he's playing, and he's been effective for the Chicago Bulls. And he had the same surgery Gabe Landeskog did by the same doctor a couple months ahead of time. So that is a positive sign for Gabriel Landeskog, that maybe things are looking up and up. And basketball is obviously a little bit harder on the knees than hockey. So I have hope still that we might see Gabe Landeskog, but ultimately I have no expectation of it, even until Gabe Landeskog is playing, because I don't know the player that Gabe Landeskog is going to be. I mean, we all remember when Peter Forsberg came back and what that looked like for a couple games. And, it was awesome. We love Forsberg, but, we just don't know the situation. And I thought it was notable that the Avs were linked to Jonathan Toews, who is going through a long recovery process himself from a multi-year injury. And by the way, he was the captain of the most successful franchise in terms of championships the last, 10, 15 years. So maybe they bring in someone else into this room if Gabe is not healthy by the deadline, that has some leadership status across the league or is well respected across the league, whether it's Toews or someone else, just to help them get through the postseason.
Full cosign for me, Jake. I am firmly in the camp of hopeful but not confident in terms of a Gabe Landeskog return, and even what it may or may not look like if and when that does happen. Jake, my friend, from the Buffs to the Nuggets to the Avs, I appreciate you bringing the heat with me every Wednesday. Feels like I blink and suddenly 37 minutes has gone by. So I appreciate all the work you do for us at Denver Sports 104.3 The Fan, all the great content at denversports.com that I read on a day-to-day and a week-to-week basis, as should all of you. And I will catch you next week, my friend.
Thanks, buddy. Make sure you subscribe and like our YouTube page, because you're doing a great job here too, Richie.
Please, yeah, like and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on socials at DEN Sports 104.3, where you can see all of the great content from guys like Jake, myself, all of our weekday lineup on the radio at your fingertips, 24/7, 365. Jake, have a great rest of your afternoon, and to the rest of you, we'll see you tomorrow.